And hello, my name is Elisa Schaefer, and it's my pleasure welcoming you to today's broadcast. One of the hats that I wear at the executive office is the liaison to the NCAA NCAA partnership and liaison to NCAA's NCAA advisory board. It's been a real pleasure for me to have the opportunity to assist the dedicated advisory board members who've been hard at work creating and refining projects to assist student athletes and the advisors and administrators who work with them. It's a joy to be able to do this with this team as they present their work to you today. I will now pass the mic to Eric Bray, who serves as our current liaison from the National Collegiate Athletic Association, the NCAA, and today's presentation team will introduce themselves and things will get started. Eric, to you.
Thank you, Lisa. Welcome everybody from cloudy Indianapolis, and I hope everybody is having a fantastic day wherever you might be. Just as a quick overview, I'll just take a few minutes of your time to kind of introduce the NCAA, what truly we do at the national office, and what our role is as it relates to your campus, and more specifically, I guess, to the advising world. So the NCAA is a membership organization. So when you say the NCAA, many times people think about the national office here in Indianapolis. But truly, the NCAA is all of our member institutions, and we have over 1,100 member institutions across the three divisions. So our role as a national office staff is really more in the liaison role, an advising role, and an interpretive role of our legislation, the legislation that the membership creates, votes on, and wants us to follow. So we always tell individuals when we're talking to them that NCAA legislation shouldn't dictate what happens on campus. Our legislation is merely a minimum standard to compete and participate in an NCAA event. So a lot of times people confuse our rules with what they should be doing on campus, and that's not necessarily what our role is. Our role is our membership is set minimum standards, whether that's credit hour requirements, percentage towards degree, and it all depends on your divisional philosophy. And I'll talk about those quickly here in a second. But again, ours are minimal standards to where our staff really interprets that legislation for the compliance athletic staffs on your campuses, which hopefully you as advisors are working with on a daily basis to make sure all of our student athletes are moving towards graduation. That's our ultimate number one goal. I mentioned the different divisions, Division 1, 2, and 3, each have unique and individual philosophies as it relates to their legislation, how they look at the academic world, and what they expect of their students. Really, when you consider Division 3, it's probably the easiest from a staff perspective because we really look to each institution to determine what you consider good academic standing. Good academic standing is across all three divisions. It's determined individually on each campus. We do not decide what good academic standing is. You as campuses decide that. But from an NCAA perspective, Division 3 really focuses on the individual campus and how they interpret what good academic standing is. When you start talking about Division 2 and Division 1, it really is more of a stair step into the complicated, I guess is a good way to put it. Division 2 has a number of requirements that their student athletes must meet to be making progress towards graduation so they can compete at the NCAA level. Division 1 gets even more complicated, and it's usually what's in the media and everybody hears about. But our job as a staff is really to work with your campuses to make sure if there's a question about a particular rule, whether it's the 6-hour rule in Division 1, good academic standing across all divisions. That's really what we're here for is at the national level, is to work with your campuses to make sure you understand what our legislation is. Therefore, then you can interpret it on your campus to see what it means for your students to make progress towards degree. So with that, I'll wrap it up and turn it over. And if you have any questions, I'll be here for the entirety.
All right, I guess I'm next up. And I'm trying to make sure, is the camera actually on me? My name is Will Lewis. I am an advisor at the University of Georgia focusing on pre-business students. So I work with a number of our first year, sophomore, and transfer student athletes in this role. What this whole presentation, I guess, is meant to focus on is why do advisors need to know who oversees the academic support of student athletes on your campus? And I think that essentially that comes down to we need to know who to communicate with. We need to know, all these changes that happen in college athletics, all these changes that happen on your university level. Who is going to be in charge of maintaining all that information so that we can deliver that to the student athlete? So I think that if you work with student athletes currently, or if you're hoping to eventually work with student athletes, it's important to know that communication with this group is probably key, more so than any other in terms of intra-campus communication. So as Eric alluded, D1 and D2 may have another individual on campus, an athletic advisor, an athletic counselor, someone who follows along with those NCAA requirements that a major advisor may not. So are you communicating with that individual? And if not, how can you set up that communication? Advisors of the athletic level and counselors on the athletic side, they may have information about NCAA rule changes, conference rule changes. They may have information about coaching changes that can impact a student's experience on campus. Whereas the major advisors, they're going to have a lot of that information about curriculum changes and major opportunities that may be available to that student athlete later on down the road that we might want to work out and try and get them involved with. So that's really the key reason why this is important information to know. So that's all well and good, right? That we need to communicate more, but where should you start? If you're looking to get started, what should you be doing? First and foremost, before you go cold calling anybody, before you send a random email to a department looking for information, I would say to do a little bit of research on your campus. Find out specifically who oversees the athletic or academic support aspects of student athlete life on your campus, because it is going to be different. Again, as Eric alluded, they sort of leave that up to each university to do as they wish. So on some campuses, that can be the office of the provost or an office of instruction. It may be an academic enhancement unit, but it can also be the athletic department as well. So determining who that is may impact not only that student athlete's experience, but it can impact the advising services that you provide. So for example, on my campus, the athletic department oversees that academic support unit. So geographically, that means that I can't always walk right into that person's office and stop by and say, hey, I have a question about this student. That usually means that as an advisor, I'm going to have to send a measured email or a phone call and plan out how I'm going to communicate with that other individual. So knowing that about my campus is key. It's also good to know beyond that advisor, beyond that athletic counselor, who else might you need to be aware of? We have other individuals involved in our athletic department who keep track of progress toward degree and some of those rules, and occasionally I'll interact with them. So it's good to know the full scope and the full services that are available to that student athlete. Once you have that established, I think that's really a good time to dip your toe into the water in terms of all the literature that's available through NCAA for student athletes to get involved with that online course they're going to offer this summer, and then to especially email or call that individual that's going to be available on campus to say, hey, this is who I am. This is why I'm asking information about this student. It's always going to be nerve-wracking to establish that initial connection, especially if you find your athletic department to be intimidating. They do tend to move at seemingly 2 times the speed of everywhere else on campus. But trust me, they're going to want to hear from you, and they're going to want to establish that relationship with you because it is going to be in the best interest of that student to have that intra-campus relationship. So not to steal the thunder of Wes, I'm going to pass it over to him to let him talk a little bit more on reporting lines, but I hope to hear your questions later.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Wesley Moss. I'm currently the Assistant Vice President for Undergraduate Education and the Director of the Student Athlete Academic Center at Florida International University. So in terms of reporting lines, let's take a step back quickly and talk about kind of the transition and the trends. So if you go back 20, 25 years, universities working with the NCAA started putting processes in place to talk about progress towards degree. to ensure that our student athletes are students first, not just athletes, and ensuring that they have opportunities to find success in the academic fields of their choice, not in fields that are created to facilitate eligibility. That bringing students into the university setting, it gives them the opportunity to have a true student experience, to go into difficult majors, to be supported academically, and to have the resources around them to really balance their time between their academic commitments and their athletic commitments. Well, when the NCAA started putting things in place to ensure students were on track, keeping track towards progress towards degree, many athletic departments looked at the resources that were available to them, the times that they were available, and just made decisions on they needed internal support for student athletes from an academic success standpoint. So every university across the country came up with a plan within their athletic department on how they could support the students that they were bringing into the university. It's traditionally the same that they would do with strength training, with athletic training. All those resources are in some way available on campus, but they wanted to create their own internal process for doing so. So in terms of the reporting lines, as this process created, as the student-centered experience was, coming full circle, many athletic programs, many athletic departments were the reporting lines for the academic advisors that work with athletes, the learning specialists, the tutors. They all report back to basically the athletic director. In some cases, they report to the senior women's administrator. And recently, the trend has been created where senior administration has been put in place underneath the athletic director to provide support for specifically student athlete development and student athlete support services. So if you go out and look right now on staff directories, you might find 10, 15, 20, 100 professionals that are dedicated just towards student athlete development or student athlete support services. One of the trends that we're seeing now, and one of the ones that I'm most excited about, especially with the collaborations between NCAA and N4A and just the ongoing education about the student athlete experience, is that many of these departments now are being moved from under athletics into something like academic affairs. To give the staffs in those departments a different opportunity to be more visible within campus relationships, to be more collaborative, to take it out of that siloed experience where everything is in the athletic department. So for example, here at Florida International University, we report directly to the Office of Academic Affairs. In my last role at the University of Arizona, we reported to the Office of Academic Affairs as well. And I think that's significant for a couple of reasons. One, as an academic staff, when you're working with student athletes, there can be a conflict of interest between the athletic piece and the academic piece, whether it's time commitment, whether it's major selection, whatever the component may be. And having the opportunity to work under a department such as academic affairs just gives the staff the ability to be more transparent in what they're trying to work with. And all I mean by that is when we're reporting to the Office of Academic Affairs, we have different levels of support built around us to ensure that the students have every opportunity to pursue majors, to pursue resources on campus, to be more integrated into the campus life, just because of the relationship between our office and my direct supervisor, which is the Vice President for Academic Affairs. So athletic directors are charged with very specific areas of control, of supervision, of responsibility. Many of those are built around bringing revenue into the university, overseeing athletic coaches, facilities, and things like that. Their main area of emphasis is not the academic realm. So in the reporting lines, if you have someone that is reporting directly to the Vice President of Academic Affairs, the provost, whatever it might be, you're going to get a different experience and a different comfort level with the roles and the processes of campus. But essentially, as this process continues to grow, as student athletes continue to develop, currently there are a lot of things out there with the NCAA in terms of time legislation and things that are giving students different experiences and opportunities to travel abroad, to do internships, even in season. You're going to see this continue to transition and meld and grow. But from the process of simply reporting lines, you basically have two different areas. You either have many of the offices reporting straight to the athletic director or SWA, or in some cases, reporting to the Offices of Academic Affairs.
All right. Thank you so much, Wes. This is our very brief overview on reporting lines. So now we're actually going to move into the Q&A portion. Viewers, as I mentioned earlier, you are welcome to use the Q&A pod to send in questions. We'll address as many questions of those as we can in the 15 minutes that we have left today. And if you aren't able to get your specific question in, we do have you can email the main office or myself. And for those of you who are following along, I am monitoring the NCAA NCAA questions posted there. So I do show we have a few questions already posted. So I'm gonna ask Catherine this, and maybe Wes, you can pipe in on this as well. What are some of the kind of more specific functions of an athletic advisor?
Hi, everyone. So I'm Catherine Moffett, and I'm an athletics academic advisor at the University of Hawaii at Manoa with Student Athlete Academic Services. So I guess I can attest to being an athletic academic advisor, just kind of the unique functions that I have compared to other academic advisors at the major or the college level. So some of the things that go into my role that are a bit unique is that I monitor my students' NCAA eligibility and their progress towards degree requirements, in addition to GPA, which many of us look at as well. But I like to tell students that my particular expertise is really in terms of helping them to navigate the NCAA eligibility world and staying eligible for the following season, taking the correct number of applicable versus non-applicable credits, and so on to help them maintain their athletic eligibility. Another unique kind of function that I have is that I at times travel with my teams. So for example, I just traveled last week with one of the teams that I work with to their championship meet, which always falls on final exam week. So I served as the exam proctor for my students on that trip. And the athletics department will, essentially pay for an athletic advisor to travel with the team to serve that function and just best support the students, especially during critical periods, such as exam week. I also do different things like coordinate learning services for my students, whether that's study hall or some of the in-house supports that we have, like tutoring, mentoring, writing center programs, things like that. On my campus as well, I actually register my students for their classes so that they get priority registration over other incoming or continuing students. So I manually register all my student athletes for classes as well. And then I also do other things that other advisors on campus do as well, right? So advise students towards graduation, monitor GPA, as I mentioned, talk about different major and career options. So I do kind of the standard advising as well, and then wear the kind of athletic specific hat in terms of helping students to schedule classes around practice and competition, trying to help them determine what classes might be good to take in the off season versus the in season, and trying to balance help students balance those commitments as well. I don't know if Wes has anything to add.
Yes. So in the role of our academic coordinators here at FIU, one of the things that we have been very specific about in our approach is that we wanted to ensure that we have a great staff of professional academic advisors on campus. We are in no way trying to duplicate their role. And in fact, we rely heavily on the academic advisors in terms of their experience, their knowledge. Our role as our academic coordinators is to assist the academic advisors in the roadmap process of helping a student figure out what major they're going to go into, and then once they do, how we can best assist them in that 4-year process of earning a degree. Much like what Catherine was speaking about, our role is to make sure that we know a little bit of a different variable in dealing with our student athletes, such as practice times, travel times, their peak sessions. So an academic coordinator, our staff might have a caseload of 150 kids, where their professional advisor counterpart might have a caseload of 350 to 500 kids. And so it's just not feasible to know the intimate details about the student that we might have access to. So when a student meets with an academic advisor and gets a course offering of several courses, our role is to then take those courses and try and find the best fit for the student in their term-by-term career. So for a sport that might be a fall sport that travels heavy during the fall semester, that is up early, so they have weights and practice in the morning, there might be opportunities for an 8 a.m. class that the student wouldn't be able to take because they're in weights or they're doing conditioning. So our role is to help support our academic advisors from the standpoint of providing the intimate knowledge of the schedule for the student, putting them in the best position to be successful, and then collaborating as best as we can to make sure that that student earns their points for graduation.
Wonderful, thank you. Looks like we have a question regarding community college. It says it spoke primarily on the university level. What about the community college level? Michelle, would you like to start this one off?
Sure. So as far as community college, as Eric mentioned, as you think about the divisions, things get, I think, a little bit more complicated in the fact that who plays the roles. And so my experience at community college, the academic coordinator, counselor is often the coach. The head coach. And so that is a good place to start in regards to if there's a coach that's assigned that works with athletics. In my case, I was kind of contracted out with the university that I was working with to be a counselor for a community college team. And so I would, meet with the students, learn about the structure, the requirements at the institution, and guide students in completing those requirements, but functioned kind of outside the athletic role. So as far as community colleges, a lot of people wear different hats. And so starting with a coach would be my suggestion if you're beginning to think about the structure within your community college.
Does anyone else have anything they'd like to add? Because this is kind of along similar lines. So with that, what advice do you have for a student athlete academic support staff of one? I know Michelle mentioned being in touch with the coach. Any other thoughts from anybody?
So if we go back a couple of years in my career, when I started at the University of North Florida, I was actually, we transitioned from Division II to Division I. And during that process, there was a 4-year window where I was the only academic support professional in the program. So I have a lot of experience with that. My advice would be is that you can't do it by yourself. And the more that you can collaborate with the people on campus and the professionals that have the information that can help you throughout the process, the better off you're going to be. We always say, that, you're not asking for less work, just more broad shoulders. And so with that process, you just have to find the people on campus that can help you the best in the areas that you need to grow and need that support. So whether it's an academic center for excellence on campus, whether it's a career resources on campus, don't try and recreate the wheel. Go visit with those people on campus that have these roles, that have the functionality that can help support you, and then find ways that you can collaborate and be effective as a unit.
I would also add, I would say I totally agree about your other offices being your support, and then building those relationships with those contacts on campus so that your student athletes feel secure in going to speak with them, but using those around you, as what Wes said, to support you so you don't feel like you're dealing with it or bearing the load on your own.
Wonderful. So what about there seems to be a difference, as we've discussed already, between an academic advisor and an athletic advisor. So our academic advisors out there, so what should they be asking those athletic advisors? Will, do you want to start that one off for us?
Sure. So I think the main questions that an academic advisor should be asking an athletic advisor are largely going to center around travel schedule, first and foremost. What is that student's travel demands based on their sport? And that can be different based on the sport. It can be different based on the level of play. It can be different based on where that student's at in their progression within their sport. Are they a freshman? Are they redshirting? Are they a senior? Are they getting a lot of playing time? Where are they at? And that can affect, if they're playing baseball in the spring, they may be traveling midweek, and that's going to have an effect. Basketball seem to be traveling in maybe November all the way into the spring. If they're swimmers and divers, they may not be necessarily competing with their school team, but could be competing with a club team over the summer. So that can impact when summer courses might be taken, or can impact whether or not they should be looking at online course options as a way to fulfill certain requirements. So asking about travel demands on a student athlete is probably the number one question I tend to ask athletic advisors. What is that student doing in this next semester, or these next 2 semesters, from a travel standpoint? The other thing that I also tend to focus on is I get to meet with students as an academic advisor, required once per semester. And sometimes I meet with them more than that, but at least just that one appointment, whereas the athletic advisor is seeing them almost every day. They're really in charge, at least on our university, of setting up those tutoring sessions for them, making sure they're having those academic needs met. And so they have a lot more insight into the day-to-day of that student, and sort of what they're facing and what their challenges might really be. I think we've all probably seen that student where they sit down in front of you and you ask them, how are things going? And they're like, oh, they're great. And really they're making straight C's in all their classes. And so that's not a really genuine answer. So I think that asking and getting an honest answer of how are they really doing, because that can mold a major direction that student might go in. It can affect maybe the reality of what that student should really be focusing on over the course of their time on your campus. Those are the two main questions I would recommend starting with.
Let's piggyback off of that. And there's a question that just came in that says, how can we help students understand the difference between an academic advisor and an athletic advisor? And how do we get the students to speak with both? Catherine, let's start off, and then maybe Will, if you have anything to add, or someone else.
Sure. So I like to tell my student athletes that I work with that I have a particular expertise area, as I mentioned previously, in terms of helping them to navigate eligibility and, schedule classes at the correct times, to coordinate with travel and practice and things like that. And I tell them that I know, I'm kind of a generalist advisor in terms of I know about general education requirements and a little bit about, each of the majors, but that the major academic advisor or the college level advisor is much more the expert on that facet. And so my students are required to meet with me at least once a semester to actually, figure out what exact classes they want to take. But many of my students also have mandatory advising with their college or major level academic advisors. So in a lot of cases, they are also required to see that advisor in the same semester. And even if they're not required to do so, I really encourage them to, especially if it's an area that I'm not as familiar with or a major that I'm not as well versed on as others. I really tell them that it's going to benefit them to see that other advisor and get that area of expertise from that person. And then we can kind of fuse together our two areas to best support the student.
And I'll add to that. For me, it starts at orientation. I want to set that expectation early for that student that this is who your athletic advisor is. This is who your academic advisor is. This is what we can do for you. And usually the way I do that is I frame it for them by saying your athletic advisor is going to be there with you on the day-to-day. They're going to help you focus on the minutia of everything you need to get done within that week and on to the next week and so on. They're going to be with you for the day-to-day. I'm going to be there to meet with you periodically every semester so we can focus on the bigger picture and so we can make meaning of where this is all going. So usually for them, I think that creates a nice sort of, I have this person for my immediate issues, but then I have this person I can go to when I need to sort of step back, take that 1,000-foot look at things and say, where is this all headed? Why am I going through all of this? It's a nice reflective piece for them to have those two. So I would say that, at least in my perspective, that's sort of the difference between the two, and that's how I explain it to students.
Wonderful, thank you. I'm going to combine these last two questions that have just come in. It says, what are some great ways to motivate athletes to take advantage of things like priority registration? Or what type of workshops or other informational meetings do you have with student athletes to raise their awareness of major requirements, career options? So that's kind of one together, but then we know that student athletes feel pulled between practice and class times. So on the other side, how do academic advisors help work with their coaches? So it's kind of two questions, but we're going to put them together. I will let you all decide who wants to answer that one.
In terms of the motivation piece, one of the things that I would encourage you to do is it starts with education. And by education, I mean your student athletes, educating them on how important the role is of the academic advisor, and really, instilling upon them what a great resource that is for them to be able to learn who their academic advisor is, get to know them on a personal level, and to be able to ask questions in that environment, because it's an environment where the advisor is there to help. I would also, from an athletic standpoint, and I have 18 years of experience dealing with coaches, trying to get them to understand and educating them on how important the academic advising role is, and trying to build that bridge of support so that when the students are conflicted or they're not as energetic about going and meeting with their academic advisor, one of the people that can be the best asset and resource for you is a coach. And so if the coaches understand the importance of that process, they can help encourage, support, drive the students to those meetings. And when you have that kind of backing, it really helps.
And I want to just jump in quickly as we're running out of time. Again, I second what Wes is talking about, and going back to relationship building. And since, coaches are the person that is in primary contact with the student athletes, building relationships with the coaches can definitely assist in understanding what the philosophy is of the team, understanding larger philosophy of the institution, how it relates to supporting student athletes, but beginning to build those relationships, finding out who those people are, and taking the time to communicate with them regularly is definitely helpful, as we all hope to support our student athletes in the best way that we can.
Thank you, everyone. I'm sorry we didn't get to all of our questions today. We do appreciate them. Wes has put out his information in the chat, as well as feel free to email myself, Elisa, elschaefer at ksu.edu. Our presenters have done a wonderful job presenting on this. We do also offer a summer online course to explore advising student athletes more deeply. We are excited for the updated content and new material, and have extended our early deadline, which was today, for one more week. So be sure to go sign up for that discounted rate. Additionally, keep your eye out on emails and Facebook, because we're going to be continuing this series throughout the summer and into fall. We do certainly hope that you'll join us. We are sure glad that you joined us today. We thank you for participating. Again, thank you to Eric, Will, Wes, Catherine, and Michelle for taking us through a very, very brief look at reporting lines. And thank you to each of you, our participants, for joining us today. Gary, would you stop the recording?